Folks, this is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Wednesday afternoon, April 9th, a little bit before 2 o'clock. We're just tying up some loose ends here. One thing we've been working on is a resolution that will be a House concurrent resolution congratulating the Southern State Correctional Facility debate team on their victory over Wake Forest University. It's a National Prison Debate League victory. We did go through some of the language here. If folks have it, we can go through it a little bit and clarify.
We're on draft 1.2.
Draft 1.2. It was on the 16th of March for folks. One thing we talked about was in the resolve section to also send this, the way the resolution is drafted, it would send a copy to the Commissioner of Corrections, Superintendent of the facility, and each member of the winning team. We thought we would add the correctional staff to it. And then there was thoughts of adding the names of the participants, but DOC felt it would be better not to add the names of the participant. And Connor, you were going to follow up with Michael Chernick.
Yep. I still need to question for the committee here. If we're not using the debaters' names, should we still use the staff names of those who are with them, or just leave names off it then?
I think it should be without names to be uniform.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you're leaving one off, you don't want to put the other in.
So we keep it the way it's been drafted. Send a copy to the commissioner, the superintendent of the facility, and each member of the winning team
Yep.
And the coach
Staff.
staff.
and the staff.
That's
Participants in the Bostons.
Okay. I'm writing all this down.
Michael,
Yeah, and Haley. It's okay.
if we could get that done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because this resolution will go on to the concurrent calendar. It won't be on our house calendar. It won't be read on the floor. It will just, you get that packet. It's every Friday or something you get resolutions in the concurrent packet.
Yep.
And it just automatically passes. They have a list of all the resolutions in there. I know folks are looking at me with some blank stares.
Nope.
But
Oh, I know.
once every week, we have a consent calendar with the resolutions. So as soon as Connor, you can connect with Michael Chernick.
Yep, I'm on it. So I'll try to guess
And then we were discussing how do we personalize it in terms of some folks on the committee really want to, but I got a bug walking across my paper. You like that?
Well, that's not good.
Oh, what?
What's a little bug?
It's a bed bug.
No, hope not. About really personalizing it a little bit for the folks who participated, so.
You mean like going down there?
No, I was writing a little note
gotcha.
or,
Yeah, maybe we could get like a nice, do we have house cards, like with a nice
Mhm.
emblem on it?
Yep.
And if we got like 5 of those and just passed it around and each one of us signed it, I think that'd be nice.
I
Right?
have
Yeah.
tons of those.
You do? Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
You talking about legislative general, the
Yeah,
actual-
General Assembly.
I got tons of them.
Awesome.
I said the postcards, or were they a little bigger?
Postcards.
You got the postcards?
Yes. Or do you want a letter? Or do you want a
No,
postcard?
I think it's something we just like a card, like we all sign. It's-
There were the
Yeah.
ones that were printed that they would print for you that had like the emblem on
Yeah.
it that said.
Yeah, you know,
House
and they suckered some of us into buying them, and we did, so. I had tons.
Great.
How many participants were there? How many
I
members?
thought it was 5, but it could have been 7.
Can you check with
Yep.
Haley on that?
Can you get the staff members as well?
Yeah. And for that, you would need, names, because like, just pretend somebody's name is Luke. You could say Luke on the card, and then we could sign it and do our thing, right?
Yeah, good call. Okay.
Yeah, we can just type up a quick little thing and then handwrite it for each one of them and then sign.
We want something a little different in case they compare. personalized.
Yeah.
Okay, so Connor, if you could take care of connecting with Michael Chernick, connect with Haley to get the names, and then James, bring in a whole stack of those postcards, because we might also want to do it to staff that participate, the debate
Yep.
coaches, and then we'll get that done.
Okay,
The other thing, and if folks can pull out what Terry Corzone gave us when she testified about the criteria that would be used for county courthouses, the county side judges to
What's
make their case about needing capital dollars for projects. Terry pulled that out. It was
This
here
one is,
last
there's a
week.
couple of them. Which one does it say? Title 4. There's that one, the other one. That's one. Okay.
So this morning, in hearing from the side judge that testified, it was really interesting to talk about them having a reserve fund.
Mhm.
And it also needs to be in conjunction with having a capital plan.
Yep.
For them. And I'm just wondering if we should add language to this criteria for the court administrator. The court administrator would evaluate requests based on the following criteria, and it lists 1 through 7. If we put in a criteria that the court administrator needs to consider their capital reserve fund amount and their yearly contribution to that fund,
I think that-
something to that effect.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good.
That makes sense to folks.
Somewhat of accountability tool.
Are there any other thoughts from this morning's testimony?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I think someone had mentioned it, and it's not in this statute, it was in the other one about the 5% of the grand list, you know,
Mhm.
someone had said that there should be a minimum. I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily.
that there should be a minimum for what?
I'm trying to remember exactly what it said, but wasn't it that they could collect up
They
to
could collect
5%
of the
of the grand
county,
list of the county
county.
to do that? Yeah. Or sorry, of the equalized assessed grand
grand
list of
list,
the
yeah.
county.
And
County.
you're saying they should have a minimum they have to raise.
Like, yeah, like they said, like we do
1%.
1.1%, and it's like, well, what does the average county do? And you know, what's that range? What is, you know, what's the difference from that max to that minimum?
Well, if you start doing that, you can't do, are you saying you do that within the criteria here? Or
Not this
state
one. This was a different
Right, for
criteria.
that,
That was the only other thing I had.
yeah,
here
that
this
would
morning.
be a lot of work to, I mean, that would be, you gotta find a bill for,
And it'd also be, so if you had a minimum, for example, just pretend you did, but their cash reserve was above the maximum that they could have, then you run into a problem, right? Because they're raising more money than they can put away.
Which personally, when they mentioned that, I didn't necessarily think that was good policy, having that cap like that on there. Because I mean,
They don't reach it.
well, they don't reach it, one, because there's no incentive to, because like what we were talking about,
Give money.
they can
Yeah.
come here and it's, you know, I think we don't mind. And I think felt like there were a lot of other people that said this. I don't think we necessarily, we want to help them out, but we don't want to be taking on all these projects because, and of course, with my greatest gratitude to Essex County, obviously, that, you know, their previous side judges, you know, showed that they, you know, were more on the fiscal, you know, the lower end of that.
Yeah.
And so now we're having to make up for that. And I don't think we would have mind putting up to, you know, I mean, clearly we're putting up all 3.6 million of it, but had that reserve built up over time, it would have taken off the pressure that we need with this year. So I think getting rid of the cap wouldn't be such a bad idea.
One of the things I always say, and I have since well before I was here, but it's always been important to me. You'll have people with good intentions usually, who will hold the line in order to say that I held the line, but in fact somebody else is paying. You know, and so in our world, you know, maybe we pass a requirement onto schools, which actually hasn't happened. And then we're like, well, we didn't raise the taxes. but you pushed a mandate on them that they have to do it. And I'm a fan, you have a mandate, you have to do it. So in your Essex, by them pushing it off and saying, hey, listen, we were good stewards, now the rest of the state has to pay for it. So that's not wise. So I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, and maybe there's some history I still don't understand to it, but I just thought that might be something worth considering. I know it's not related to
Yeah,
the title
then you
for-
gotta find a
or
vehicle
not.
in the bill and really start taking a lot of testimony on that.
Should be last night.
Troy?
Do we want to do anything to add some consistency to the MOU process between the counties and the state?
Do that. That also opens it up. I mean, we can do that. That's why I wanted to get a copy of the bill that we did.
Right.
And somehow we can't access those files. We can't access that data older than 2009, 2010, and that's where we need Ledge Council. And we've tried for 2 weeks. We have the number of the bill, I believe, H524, I think. Because, I think some of the stuff that's in the criteria in this reserve fund came out of that bill. Because that was all done like in 2010, 2011. I think it came out of a lot of what we worked on that bill. So-
Are we having trouble accessing it because it's not readily available, or is that because
It's
of court
available, but Ledge
reorganization?
Council is the one that can get beyond 2010.
Because it's in the archive.
Oh, it's in the archives.
It's in the
Okay, I didn't know if it
archives.
was related to the court restructuring.
No, it's in the archives. We can go back in our files as far as 2010, but this was 2008 or 9 session.
So by our files, you mean like as legislators?
If you
can
go,
look at
if you go into the
Right.
data
and
here,
then-
you
and
can
leg-
only go back to
Yeah.
2010
And then
session.
Ledge Council. in
They
theory, can go
have
further, but we're
access.
having-
Yeah,
Okay.
they may have to go to another Ledge Council person and just see if they're willing to
I got you.
try to find it. Been trying for 2 weeks. I mean, if people want to work on the side judge thing in the county courthouse, the MOU and the cap in terms of what they could levy,
Yeah.
I'm willing to do that. It's gonna take some work and it's gonna take some interesting testimony.
I'd be more than.
I think that's important. I mean, I don't know what everybody else would say. She was very clear. I mean, at first I thought her testimony was great, but I am a fan of having it all unified, but she's said, no, I don't think so. But if we put all these other things into place with a little bit more controls, I think that kind of can take care of my concerns about being 2 separate entities, but yet we're putting the bill. So that was a lot of rambling, but I did that.
Anna?
I mean, I would just say, I think it is a heavy lift to dig hard into this, and I'm just looking at the calendar. I would say I'm a little more interested in some of the other like bills that came in the other day, like state employee security, and what was the other one? Oh, like Troy's bill, and I just don't know if we have time for all of them, like this.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta spend some time on 32 and I want to get to that
Yes.
this afternoon.
Because I think we could do some quick stuff on the courthouses, like,
Well, if you
add
get
that
the
reserve fund,
the
but
criteria thing,
And my take is, you're right, we don't have a million years, but we can put it on the radar and have it there and know that, next year we're gonna have it as a priority comparatively,
put in the queue.
versus having it put off in the shoebox somewhere and, 4 years come back and go, maybe we should have done that.
Yeah,
That's all I mean.
so,
Well, a little bit of criteria is better than no criteria.
right,
A little bit of rainy day fund is better than no rainy day fund. I mean, if you're being forced to think about it once a year, that's not a bad thing. Even if you don't do anything about it. And the cap, you could say, once you hit the cap, you don't keep collecting, money, but it's only prudent to have savings.
Well, I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people down our way that this is a concern that's been going on for decades. So I'm more than happy to just do research on my own end and bring back just what I can find, because I found this very interesting. for me.
yeah, but in a legislative committee world, you really have to take all the testimony. You take it from the side judges, you take it from the league,
Yep.
you would take it from the court. I mean, there would be quite a bit, it'd be a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just saying, that, because it sounds like you're saying that can't happen really right now, but that would be a great thing to start later.
We could do some background work on
Oh.
it, and maybe get a broad sense of what we're looking at. I mean, we can do that. We can have Phil put out feelers again to the side judge that we had today. And I'm sure other side judges will want to come in and testify. And the league, because the league is involved in terms of those county budgets all come through your towns, as well as the judiciary.
Yep.
I mean, we can set up some time for that. And that would be talking with the some of that would be talking about the MOU between the judiciary and the side judges. And then talking about that 5% levy. Yeah. So
Yep.
we could do that if people are interested.
Oh, yeah.
See, you want to do that next week?
Would Jen be able to get that?
Who?
Would Jen be able to get the document you're looking for, the piece of legislation from before
To who? Jim?
Jen?
Darby?
Jim Carby? Yeah, somebody in Ledge County. Jen or Bryn Hare or somebody.
Go to the boss.
Or the Bryn.
I was just saying because you hadn't been able to get it for 2 weeks, that I thought Jen may be able to just.
So Phil, I guess you get the gist, right? Okay.
Well,
And I will work with Ledge Council. There is a miscellaneous Senate bill that's going through judiciary that we could add an amendment to that about the criteria that the court administrator looks at
Mhm.
if a county courthouse comes to them for state money. I'll work with, I think it's going to be Eric Fitzpatrick in terms of drafting something up, and then we'll bring that before us.
Is that an attorney?
Yeah,
Oh.
Eric is an attorney. He's working on the Senate bill, judiciary bill. The next thing I do want to talk about is, too bad Sean is still tied up. Are people interested in really trying to talk through what Sean is kind of thinking about encasing the monument, that thought of pursuing that with Laura Trishman and BGS?
I asked for that yesterday because I thought have them at the table as the engineer who's been working on it to say, this is something else that was brought to us. Is this even feasible? Which I think it is possibly. But, because sometimes engineers or people in different professions will go down only the path they know.
Yep.
and Don't think out of the box. So I think it's important that they see that people are taking interest. But the 40 million is
Yep.
going to be a hard nut to crack, if at all.
Well, what he presented yesterday is taken off in the press. So I think, so maybe we could schedule Laura Trishman and her folks, who's the person that's working there on the monument, as well as BGS for some time. BGS is gone all this week. So
Where are they?
sometime next week,
Where are they?
commissioner's gone for something. So that's why we couldn't have her in on the security. We wanted to do the security board, but she wanted to be here for that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could set up a time next week for that. So on top of that, while we got time, the committee has been interested in doing S32. And you're gonna have to get your head around it and read the bill, folks. And find out what else we want to take testimony. We really need DOC in here, their medical folks in DOC, to really talk to us how the process works
Mhm.
in DOC. What other things are folks looking at? You gotta look at the bill,
Yeah, but
you
are
gotta read
we,
the language.
are we going to be able to get them because they brushed us off for 2 weeks, is it? For our meeting with them?
They.
Yes.
Isaac and
Demo.
Demo and all of them.
Um, Mine's just like this morning, unless I am denser than I believe I am. We have two.
It's tough this morning.
Well, but they also said the opposite things. The first one said that you don't need to be as prescriptive because the law says these things can't happen except for by these people. The second one said we want you to be more prescriptive so it's not confused, nobody gets confused that, for example, an LNA can do. So they were very opposite interpretations of a which is good to hear because then you're like, well, you want to be super clear, but it's just interesting to hear.
So what information,
I want to just respond to that. I did hear the Secretary of State indicate that as long as we include some scope of practice language, that would probably cover
Medical
the testimony
practice
from the
board.
doctor. I can't remember his name.
he'll,
Yeah.
he'll some.
And then I do still have questions about wondering if we're going to need criteria for the May language, page 5, line 13. And then page 10, line 19. May is very open-ended for my, like, too open-ended for my liking.
Oh, yeah.
What page was that?
Page 5, line 13. It's about providing
May provide the
to
detail.
the detainee.
Yes.
And do we want criteria there? That's my only kind of main question on this.
It's a good one, right? Because like you can't really say will, because what if the person doesn't want you to? Right? So but so having some
And
criteria.
that's
of what-
where we take some testimony.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But-
take some testimony from DOC on that.
I would imagine DOC there. And I think a lot of it is going to be tied to length of stay,
Mhm.
or anticipated length of stay and how they're presenting, right? If it's, I've got a headache, then no, you don't necessarily need to. But if I'm going through some active withdrawals, that would be, for me, criteria to provide some medication.
The current language only pertains. No, it says offender, so offender pertains to also. No, offender pertains
Okay.
only since sentenced. So that brings me to, do we do a definition of detainee? And I know that Ben Novitzowski has a totally different interpretation. Because he's saying in the corrections world, you got to really define it a little bit different than you would in the outside world. And Katie is coming from the medical field and coming from the outside world and how you define things. So there's a little bit of a different interpretation there. So the way that we've done it, when we've worked with Ben, an offender is one who is sentenced. An inmate is a person who is not sentenced.
Inmate or detainee?
And currently, the definition for an inmate is someone who is not sentenced.
Okay.
So it'd be a detainee.
Yeah.
No, inmate is inclusive of everyone.
Yeah, inmates inclusive of everyone, but it's really, when you say inmate in the statute, it pertains to everyone. When you say offender, it only pertains to those who are sentenced.
This language is offender.
Convicted offender.
And detain.
Well, they're sentenced. They could be on furlough or they could be on parole,
Right.
but they have a sentence.
And this is an offender or detainee, so it's kind of like saying,
So I think we should define what they are, just even if we're repeating it, so that people do understand what it is.
And this is where there's a conflict in ledge council. And we've been very clear that whenever we use the term offender and inmate, we know what we're dealing with. Like when we were talking about the photo IDs, we were very clear that it was more offenders than those folks who were detainees, because they're in and out and you can't figure it out. So in terminology in the corrections world, you have to be very, very clear. When you're dealing with medication, you've got, or opioid medication, either way, you know, you've got folks who are coming in and they're going out pretty quickly. And DOC doesn't have any control when they leave. If they're a detainee, they have no control when they leave it. It's up to the court. So it's really hard for DOC to do reentry planning. It's really hard for them to do medication planning, the photo ID plan. It's just difficult because the person leaves and DOC doesn't have much notice. So that's why there's a delineation between those two. So the way that Katie has addressed it is to have a definition of detainee. And I'm trying to remember if there's definition in Title 28 of I think there's a definition of offender in inmate in Title 20 somewhere.
Would it hurt to put it in again in this?
Well, what Katie has done on page 4 is a definition of detainee.
See that?
I'm not sure that is, if we do that, if that is really a correct definition of a detainee. Because there could be someone who's sentenced that's also awaiting trial for another crime.
It could be a detainee is somebody who's waiting on arraignment as well,
Right,
Yes.
not necessarily all
Right.
waiting trial.
usually they're waiting, right.
Or-
So that's, are you looking to see if there's a,
Yep.
because it carries through on all the statutes for 28. Mental health stuff carries through everywhere. Well, we've been very specific and very cognizant of when we use those terms and what they mean.
There's no distinction here either for federal detainees, just FYI.
But is there when we use inmate?
I don't know.
I wonder if it's,
Offender definition?
you got an offender
Yeah,
definition?
means any person convicted of a crime or offense under the laws of the state. And for the purposes of work, or a person found in civil contempt under 15 BSA 603.
So offender contempt includes worker too.
And then there's no definition. Inmate means any person, not a child, committed to the custody of the commissioner pursuant to the law of the state and subsequently committed to a correctional facility, and any person confined at a correctional facility during the pendency of a prosecution against him or her. So that's your general definition.
I've got another definition here.
Oh.
Male or female offender who is committed under sentence to be confined in a penal or correctional institution.
That's old.
It's in
Where is that?
Title 28, Chapter 27. And that's relating to the interstate compact. So
Oh, that may need to have a specific definition.
There's nothing on detainee that implies.
Yeah, you've got, it doesn't talk about detainee. If you go to Title 28,
That's where I am.
Chapter,
3, Section 3, general.
yeah, right, it only talks about inmate and offender.
Yeah.
We have that already in statute. So do we want to put the word detainee?
Well, when you're talking about prescribing medication for departure, detainee there is probably going to be an important distinction. So
That's where you say offender.
no, I'm suggesting that maybe not. Hold on, I want to get there.
You're in the back, the reentry piece.
I'm on let's do page 5 first. Back to line 13. At the time of discharge from the correctional facility, the department shall provide the offender and may provide the detainee. I think detainee is an important distinction there.
Mhm.
At the time, because this is at the time of discharge, right? And if it's a detainee that has been there for
Couple of years.
a day versus 2 years, that may
Right.
matters. The
Yes.
criteria there may matter.
Right, but we worked on this last year.
Sorry.
We worked on this last
I
year.
know, but
But at the time of release,
I just don't think this level of concern maybe showed up for me last year. I'm trying to remember how we resolved this last year.
because it was in conversations with DOC in terms of what the process is when a detainee
No, because, and may provide the detainee is new statute.
I know.
Right.
But I'm wondering, because the testimony we received last year, because we're the ones who worked on this language, came up with it last year.
Yeah.
Why we didn't include detainee there,
And I don't know.
release, is because sometimes they don't have a connection, they haven't been in there long enough
Right,
to have a connection, or they've been released from the court and there's no time to
Right.
do any reentry or any planning, and they wouldn't be going out with
so that would
medication.
be a good criteria, right? Because if we're adding this may provide the detainee in there, maybe that we just didn't want to get this messy last year. I don't remember why.
So let's get DOC in and let's get WellPath in.
Yeah.
And how would you determine the length of time, for example, as a criteria?
That's the criteria, right? Yeah, I don't know.
But is it 5 days, is it 10 days, is it 15, is it a month?
I think testimony would help.
So let's schedule in DOC and their medical. Somebody can look at the,
Are you remembering that detainees were excluded for simplicity's sake, or is that just?
That's what I'm,
Guess.
complexity of
Yeah.
DOC not having control of when they leave.
yeah, I do remember that question that you just brought up of these folks who are taken to court and the court says you're done. So suddenly they had been a detainee for however long and the court's saying you don't have to go back there.
Listen,
We shouldn't necessarily require the DOC to provide them with the medication that they need.
yeah,
But I can come up with scenarios where I would want that detainee, a detainee, not necessarily that one, a detainee to get some medication.
Right, again, depending upon how long they've been there as well.
And the severity of their
Right,
illness,
right, absolutely,
whether that's blood pressure, whether that's,
right,
if they've been reliant on medication while being detained, I think we have an obligation to provide them a transition
right.
of that prescription, whether it's non-MOUD or MOUD medication. But I can also come up with scenarios where,
So let's get
that's
DOC,
understandable.
folks, let's work, this is also helping our schedule. So let's get DOC to specifically talk about providing detainees with medication upon their release.
Yeah.
What that process is, how complicated is it possible or not? And they're also gonna have to bring in somebody from WellPath and really look at the language and not talk about high level. They're gonna look at the language. I'm a stickler for looking at the language. So also on page 5, lines 4, I had a question there about any contract between DOC and any provider, physical or mental health provider, for continuation and provision of medication at the time of admission and thereafter. What does that entail thereafter? Does that also entail reentry? Or is it ongoing? That question came up from us in the committee.
we probably need a scope of practice clarification for line 5 there too.
Right. Well, if you define it,
Sure.
then
Yeah.
it takes in your scope of practice.
Yeah.
Yes, and we would have to define what thereafter meant.
Always and forever.
Well, they're saying it could be forever or 2 days or.
We're going through as,
I'm on-
call it S, it's H32.
Yeah, I got it. I thought that we were going back over it. There was a lot to it during the.
Are you on the phone or on camera?
Camera.
Damn it, Troy.
I tried to find you. I was gonna walk behind you with your model.
I knew to hide from you.
I actually had a better idea, but I can't
I
say,
went,
but I can't say it,
I
remember.
went up, oh, we're on.
We're, uh,
I went upstairs to one of the meeting rooms. Actually, we've met it before, we've met up there. That's where we were.
40.
Yeah,
41?
Yeah.
You were hiding from rabbit ears. You're a wise man.
Kept it high. Kept it on the high.
Sure.
When we all go low. Yeah. No.
Yeah, that's what you were saying.
Tonight. I think.
Let's see.
So we'll get ready for the calls.
I,
I
yeah.
can't wait to see your
I
cabaret
threw
presentation.
Will and Mary under the bus.
No.
The way it goes.
Let's
They want
focus on
to-
the.
yeah, sorry.
folks.
Shouldn't thereafter just be through release?
Well, that's
that
what
cover it?
that's what I highlighted. Was it reentry? But that's something we should ask DOC about too, is that. So let's keep going through the bill here and see what folks have for,
I think you're right, Connor. I think if you do through release as opposed to just to release or thereafter, or whatever, that covers it, right?
I have page 6, line 12, sir, within 24 hours, and I don't have any indication of why I accepted it.
but you're in the MOUD, so let's make sure.
We've got a question or something?
Or maybe I just needed the clarification and it was there. Yeah, maybe it's not there in the general medication, but it
What
is there.
line was it?
Page 6, line 12, within
So-
24 hours.
So that is the MOUD section. For those.
Yeah.
I think I probably circled it when I found what I was looking for. That's probably my best recollection. I was looking for how long it should take them to do that.
So it also has, the department shall determine whether an inmate, on line 16, is currently using. So,
That, I'm good with that, because we want everybody screened within
but why
24
are we
hours,
using detainee?
because it's everybody. We're not
Inmate
distinguishing,
is everyone.
yeah. We want everybody screened within 24 hours, whether
Right.
they're convicted or no,
Right.
or arraigned even.
This is a question, not a. But if they're a short-term detainee, we don't want to be providing the next month's.
This is upon intake, though, not upon release.
Well,
We want
no,
them
no, I
covered
agree.
for-
I agree with
for-
this. It's a tangent.
You know,
So that's your criteria. How long have they been with us before
I think that's one criteria that
that
we should
kicks in? Yeah,
consider.
that's part of the criteria.
Right.
There'll be probably numbers of people that are taking in over the weekend and
Right.
So within the first 24 hours, each inmate shall be screened. It's not assessed. They are screened, which is a very high level. And it's part of their initial and ongoing substance use screening and assessment process. And then the department would determine whether the person is currently using medication in the course of the MOUD. Pursuant to 801, this title, so 801 is going back to the medical piece.
got a dumb question, but line 16, 17,
Mhm.
wouldn't there be numbers of people that would be detained that are on medication, but they're not prescribed at all because they're buying it illegally?
And there's no standard prescription for it. You have to go back to 801.
Yeah.
You have to go back, if you go read
Section
line
801, okay.
801, you have to go back, and that's where you have your screening issues and then your prescription. And that's where you have to validate that the person has a prescription. So if they're just using it off the street, that's not a validation.
Right. Doesn't mean a doctor won't determine now that they get a prescription, it just means
Right.
you're not following the existing prescription.
That's where your medically necessary kicks in. But those are questions you should ask DOC. Okay? So one thing I want to go back to, well, it's in the medical piece. And it's also in the MOU decrease. Last year, we indicated, like when a person was reentering the community and to continue their continuity of medication, that it was the department or its contractor would identify the healthcare provider or the treatment program. And the reason that we did that was for the continuity for the person. Because if they're in, they got some alcohol abuse going on, they've been dealing with it while they're incarcerated, they re-enter. You want them to continue in a treatment program. We wanted to make sure either the department or the contractor connected with that treatment program. This draft takes out or its contractor. And remember, we talked about this, where WellPath has a contract with DOC, so it implies that the department is responsible for it, but it is not the department that does that actual legwork, it is the contractor. So do we want to go back, keep current language, or do we want to delete or its contractor?
Is it just for flow, or do we foresee a practical impact on this? Because the contractor would be an agent of the department, right? So like, in a way, I think that would be covered, but
But, right,
I don't know, yeah.
it's the contract, it's WellPath that makes those
Hmm.
contacts. And we went through this a lot last year.
I think it should stay in, but it's,
What, I'm not following the but, if the department's responsible,
But they're not the ones doing the
I
work.
understand, but they delegate a lot of things. They're still responsible, so
In testimony that we received last year, yes, the WellPath has a contract with the department. And WellPath has to answer to that contract.
Right.
But the actual legwork of setting up that continuity out in the community is WellPath. So if you just say the department, the interpretation could be the central office in Waterbury needs to do it.
versus it has, should be.
Versus every facility has WellPath in every facility. That's the difference, because WellPath is not in the central office. The actual folks who are setting up those setting up those appointments out there, if you're released from Newport, you've got the WellPath folks right there in the Newport facility that are doing that work.
Mhm.
If you're in St. Albans or Rutland or Springfield, you've got WellPath in each one of those facilities doing that work.
Yep.
If you say the department, it implies central office.
Yeah.
That, it's a matter of interpretation.
yeah, no, I hear you.
Clarification, but
I think I'm fine adding the or contractor, the or being the key word for me. I do have a dream that someday this is provided in-house and it would be the department doing it, but I don't see the harm in including it, yeah,
you're.
I mean, we had it
you're almost
already.
agnostic.
almost.
You're almost agnostic.
What page are you on for this?
Well, it's in all through,
Yeah.
it's the part of,
Like 616,
yeah, it's on page 6.
department shall determine.
Yeah.
Sub B,
We worked on
as it's
this,
just up above,
we worked on this last.
6.
So is the committee feeling we should go back, keep current statute, the department or its contractor
Yeah,
could
I-
identify?
Yeah.
Now, what we had last year was any necessary licensed healthcare provider. It's been changed to identify a healthcare practitioner licensed to prescribe medication for opioid use disorder.
And operating within their scope, right?
Oh, I was just gonna add that, operating with the scope of practice.
But if you go back to the definition, your healthcare practitioner is already defined
Yeah.
as acting within the individual scope of
Yep.
practice.
Healthcare
Okay.
practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nowhere does it say.
It says
Oh,
a healthcare practitioner. when you have a definition of healthcare practitioner on page 4.
I understand, but nowhere does it say scope of practice.
And that that was Sheila's suggestion to the testimony,
Right.
but it's not in there yet, yeah,
Right.
right.
If we do that in the definition, every place that healthcare practitioner is
Yeah.
used indicates that they have an individual scope of practice.
Yes.
Right. That was all I was saying, is it needed to be probably in.
Yeah, it's over.
And, let me see. The department or its contractor may contract with a caseworker. Contract may employ, so this is a little different on the bottom of page 9 and the top of page 10. And we need to ask, what does DOC think? Because this is a big shift in the current language, current law, bottom of page 9,
Mhm.
lines 21. The department or its contractor may employ or contract with a caseworker.
Or contract with us crossed out.
Right, I'm just saying what current law is, so you know what current law is, and this is really changing, may employ a caseworker.
And they said something about this when they were talking about this last week. I forget what it was though. Or when Katie was here.
Well, we have to check in with DOC on this.
Yeah.
There are a lot of instances where the department is there without or its contractor. And then on page 5, it's actually crossed out.
Page 5.
Page 5, line 12.
But on 10, we did hear that the health navigator is a contract. They don't work for the DOC. So that's why that was left that way. As far as the rest of the sentence, I'm ambiguous or questioning. But that part, we were told that the health navigator is a contract. They don't work for them. That's the only part of the sentence I'm sure of. The rest of it, we need.
Doesn't even make sense, current law. Department owns contractor may employ or contract with a caseworker health navigator. But does the department employ a caseworker? They don't employ all the caseworkers they work with. Do they?
Yes.
Employee doesn't necessarily mean
Could say use,
hire there. Yeah.
may use
I like that.
a
Maybe it's, yeah.
caseworker or contract with a health navigator. We gotta ask how that plays out with DOC. So then we still have on line 18, page 10, department owns contractor shall provide the offender and may provide the detainee. So again, we gotta look at what criteria to trigger that may. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Two places.
Okay. And then on page 11, what would we like to see? We want to take some testimony in terms of what training does DOC staff currently have
Yep.
for MOUD?
Mhm.
And how specific do we want to be? So we've been trying to get somebody in their academy or talking to us about training DOC.
That was mentioned once.
Yeah.
What kind of training? There are a couple of other things too. You mentioned Diva coming in to see whether or not at the very end of the draft,
Mhm.
there is some kind of report or
Right, yeah, it's from substance use disorder medication for opioid use disorder in correctional facilities. Diva, in consultation with DOC, would submit a report to us containing the aggregate number of previously incarcerated individuals reentering the community and seeing if they're still receiving MOUD.
And you wanted to know whether or not Diva had the capacity to
Yeah,
work on that.
yeah.
In addition, the last time Tony Fallon was in, he mentioned two physicians. Dr. Brooklyn, who I think was the technical pharmaceutical person. And Dr. Lord, who was the hub and spoke. Do you have experience with re-entry of incarcerated individuals?
And wasn't Dr. Brooklyn from Wisconsin or something? Wasn't one local and one away?
Lord is from the Lebanon
Lebanon
area,
area, yeah.
and I thought Brooklyn was associated with UVM, but I may have gotten it wrong.
Why don't we see if we could get Dr. Lord,
Lord,
Fred,
Lord.
yeah, why don't we, because he's with MAT system, he's with the MOUD. Let's see if we can get him in. And then we'll have to get some folks in for training, the training of DOC staff. For that. Other items on this bill? I know this is a tough bill to get their head around, but if we want to vote it out and want to do it, we got to understand it, right?
I don't know if maybe we can have the committee discussion to determine, but the idea of injectables, like what are we doing with that? Like, do we want that as an option? It did kind of hit home when Tony said, you don't want to put someone on something that they can't get when they're released, right? So I just didn't know if we were coming down one way or the other, because I do sympathize with the idea if somebody's on injectables going in, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to switch them? Does that have an impact?
I also like the problems it solves with diversion, with
I know.
administration, but
It's like 4 times as expensive.
right, and that doesn't stop me at all. Because I'm willing to compare that to the administrative savings. I'm willing to compare that to the diversion problem. I'm willing to compare that, right? At some point, we just have to say MOUD in a carceral facility has issues that don't exist anywhere else. Diversion being one of them, the length of time it takes to administer it being another. And if we can keep people from not having to be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning to stand in line, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. That being said, I just don't know if we're there yet, medically and best practices. I also am sympathetic to Tony's comments on some people don't want the injection. That forced delivery feels not good for me. There's a lot of pros and cons on that one.
But I kind of agree with Connor. If someone's coming in with it, they should be presented with it inside. I think. I don't think it's going to be a lot of people, but I think that I kind of agree that we should, whatever they're coming in with, we should try to
maintain.
But we're not starting anybody inside with injectables. Right. But I do agree with that.
I was told by somebody if you eat marijuana, it has a different effect than if you smoke it. So I don't know what that does with these drugs.
So we changed the language, folks, on page 7. And I think part of this is to allow future flexibility. We changed language on page 7. Provider authorized to prescribe buprenorphine. We changed that to prescribe the proposed medication. And we also changed on line 13 from bupe. We had transferring from bupe to methadone. We took that out. And it means to a new medication.
Yeah.
So medication is pretty broad, where I'm thinking it could include injectables once they get to that point.
And we certainly can
And
ask
that's
them,
why-
that's their interpretation, right?
I think that's why they wanted
Yeah,
that
I think so
language.
too.
Yeah, the department is interested in doing a pilot on injectables. I know that. The cost.
It's the cost, and they were hoping what they were hoping with that the
I get it.
cost savings in terms of staffing for the Medline and staffing of the infirmary, it would drop that cost, and they were hoping that cost savings would offset the injectables, but it really didn't work out that way.
I think I'm okay leaving it status quo at this point because I do see the department has a curiosity about it and they're looking into it. And I don't know if we need to disrupt that at this point, you
But
know?
it is interesting, if somebody is coming in on an injectable and then we don't provide it.
That's a little weird
It's
to me.
it's kind of like what Tony was saying on the outside.
Right. We
What
don't want,
happens, but if they're coming in and they're on an injectable and then they're not using it.
because obviously it's working for them on the outside. I mean, that's what he said, you don't want to mess people up with what's. So that's, I just think that for as many people who are going to come in with injectables, it seemed like it's a very small group of people. I think we should just consider it.
What's your definition of working for them? If they're being incarcerated, I'm sure it's working for them.
Correct, right.
Or they could be incarcerated for something totally not connected to. the-
Very good point. Good point taken.
Yeah,
What I was gonna say is, I concur, I agree. But when I look at it, I go, the difference between leaving the facility, for example, if you're on injectables, not having it available, you could have your life messed up because there's no protection, there's no bumpers. But if you're coming in, you have a whole system wrapped around you that's, I'm not advocating for that, like say, oh, the hell that you had them and we're not giving it to you. I'm not saying that. But if one was going to happen, I'd rather that one happen than the other. Because you go back on the street and you don't know, at least one person knows what I mean in here. But yeah,
just get some to us. And then we just got the water. I'm gonna forward it to everybody. Just got the letter explaining what we did. What is?
Show you with the letter from Sarah Clark.
Yep.
Right here.
I'll just forwarded it to everyone. So we'll get some folks in to testify here on S-32. Folks are still interested in working on it, right?
Very much.
You're gonna have to really focus on this, because somebody's gonna report this bill on the floor, and it's not gonna be me. It's not gonna be me.
She doesn't want us, she doesn't like the sponsor.
You're the sponsor, you don't do it. I don't like having sponsors do it.
Nothing wrong with it.
That would be interesting, yeah.
That would not be a good way to do it.
He just starts mumbling, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Can't believe we're doing this, yeah.
It's for one person.
It just doesn't look well out there if you're the sponsor of the bill.
Yeah.
And you report
Really
it.
happy to be here.
Doesn't look- Oh. So I just sent everyone the letter.
What?
Cash fund, cash fund.
It's all about the cash fund. We're not happy with what we do with the cash fund.
So isn't.
We just got a letter from the administration. It's the
Yeah.
Senate Institutions Committee just got it.
Happens to you all the time, doesn't it, Sweeney?
It used to be just a Dear Jane letter. Now it's a Dear whatever. They also have concerns with the house's funding reduction of the 3-acre stormwater compliance by 400,000. Well, the money isn't going out the door. The 1 million for HVAC system
Good luck.
and the 3.1 million for the 3 Bs.
We want to be on for this part too, I'm asking.
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's being sent to Senate institutions. There you go. Oh. So anyway, I just forwarded it to you folks
Thank you.
for that. So we've got some things for scheduling next week, right? We hope.
Yeah, BTS and I last week, because they couldn't schedule anything this week, scheduled two things ahead of time for next week. One was 349 building security. And the other one was the Windsor property. Today, BGS, Shayna Lyon has said that they are so busy next week with so many requests for testimony,
From probably Senate institutions.
probably, that they're wondering if we could delay the Windsor property, and also suggested, have I invited Forest Parks and Recreation to that meeting? And that they would probably need some lead time to schedule testimony at the same time. I said that I would ask my chair whether or not they appear to be willing to do Tuesday at 1 o'clock on the 15th, but it would require them to move an external meeting to enable them to do that on
Is
the
that-
Windsor property.
On the Windsor, you know, the Windsor property was just to give us some background of where it all is. In forests and parks, it's more fish and wildlife than forests and parks, because Fish and Wildlife has the wildlife management area.
Right, I think her email said
Forest
Forest Parks and
Parks.
Recreation, but that may be a mistake on her part.
I mean, we can put off the Windsor thing for another week. It's no big deal.
Then the
But the security,
security one is scheduled for Thursday at 11 o'clock. And to also include judiciary.
right, Terry wants to be here for that, because it talks about security within courthouses.
And so there's a number of things I can reach out to both DOC and outside people on H32.
Mm-hmm.
There also is having trouble getting in contact with the constituent of Chris Pritchard, and I will continue to work on that.
Yeah.
And
And if we decide to do work on 294, which is the commissary and telecommunications, we really need to talk to DOC.
I have tried for 2 weeks to get Kristen Calvert. And the first week I was given one time she could meet with us on Friday. And the second time I was given 2 times, both of which you are on the floor. So I'm still trying with that. And I think that's all that I have currently on my plate to be working on for schedule.
Well, tell them we want them in next week on the commissary.
Right.
I mean, we gotta, if we're gonna work on this, is it just Kristen Calvert? Can somebody else?
They told me that she was the lead on this issue.
Well, she's not needed over in Senate institutions. Like BGS is.
Is she the interim or the permanent deputy
I think
commissioner?
she's the permanent,
DOC?
yeah.
Yeah, tell Nick, you can't get your assistant to come, we'll make you come.
Okay, we'll just keep working on that.
Mhm.
How are the little subcommittees going here on the victim notification?
We're meeting
Oh,
tomorrow and Friday mornings.
Is the date, but we couldn't get anyone from corrections.
Yeah, corrections gave us 2 weeks out. The 22nd was the closest they could do,
Wait a minute.
Which is ridiculous.
which Mary let them know she wasn't happy with.
Gently.
Very gentle.
Of course.
We'll do the best we can
Yes,
with what we got.
yep.
And then we also talked about the Bennington Monument and your thoughts, and we're hoping next week we could have at least Lord Trishman Historic Preservation and somebody from.
But I think we've got to have the engineers, because they're the ones that are focusing on what the fix is going to be, so. they-
So if we could schedule that in the morning, then BGS isn't tough in the afternoon.
Yeah, I don't know what the 6 requests for testimony are about, but
Cedar Waxworks are back. There's
We saw
one
them this
there.
morning.
Did you?
Yeah, Phil and I saw them this morning.
A whole slew of them.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of them.
They were so
Last year, there was like 20 of them. There's
Yeah.
only one that.
Look at you guys getting distracted.
The ice pellets were coming down yesterday, hitting them, and the one just kind
They
of.
were out there yesterday.
I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I came all the way from Florida for this?
I know, like,
Pickens yesterday.
here's the sun.
There's only one out there now.
Oh, no, we had several.
Well, last year, there was like 20 of them.
No, because I said to Jean at one point, look out the window, and it was just,
I've been looking for them. I missed them
They got this
yesterday.
beautiful gray and yellows and black. They're so
it's not
gorgeous.
that I wasn't paying attention to what was going on.
You can see them.
You guys are enjoying the birds and I get to look at James.
I mean, you know, you're pretty lucky. You also get Connor.
Wait, now, there's a
There's a that one. He's got the whole tree.
It was
Careful, lad.
I wasn't paying attention, which is dangerous.
Are we still on?
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
we are. We're finishing up. We're finishing up. So we'll figure out the whole testimony thing. So we're done for tomorrow. We're back here at 9:00. And we're gonna be going through some skills
Oh,
for that.
there you go.
You
So
know.
let's go off of YouTube. We're done.